In today's show, the Blazers dump Root Sports. It's about to get easier for Portlanders to watch their favorite basketball team. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen. Coming at you Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, all August long, 3 days a week for all of August and September. Then we'll be back to our regular 5 days a week schedule once we get a little bit closer to the season. But for now, still make it your first listen and tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team at most dang days. In today's show, we're going to talk about the Blazers' new TV deal. It was announced last week that the Blazers have dumped Root Sports after a great partnership, quote unquote. The Blazers are moving on. What they're moving on to has not been made official yet, but I think there's some pretty obvious guesses that we can make based on the future of the league and then the future of sort of broadcasting in the league. I want to talk about that future a little bit. What's sort of next for how this is all going to work as the NBA media landscape continues to shift underneath our feet and right in front of our eyes as well, depending on which metaphor you'd like to choose. And then I want to talk, I want to back up a little bit to close the show and talk about how we got here. This was an inevitable end, but this was not an unavoidable end. The Blazers kind of made this choice, and I want to talk a little bit how we got here. Let's start with the news though, because this is the big stuff. The Blazers last Thursday announced that after 4 years broadcast on the regional sports network Root Sports, majority owned by the Seattle Mariners, that they are moving on, and they released a statement that reads the following. I think they just released this to local media. National media might have got this too, but they distributed this amongst the media. The following statement from the Portland Trailblazers. Trailblazers basketball will no longer air on Root Sports, but we thank Root Sports for years of great partnership. An exciting announcement on the future television home of the Blazers basketball will be made soon. I really butchered that final sentence. One more time for you. An exciting announcement on the future television home of Blazers basketball will be made soon. That's the official statement from the Portland Trailblazers. Where is that future? We don't know, but what we do know is it will be no longer on Root Sports. Root was just a problem. It was a problem. It was a problem for a variety of reasons. The number one reason is that it wasn't distributed very widely. It was on Comcast, so it was available over a cable provider, but it was not available on any of the big streamers. So if you were a subscriber to things like Hulu was their live product, or YouTube TV, the sort of the large, powerful streamers, Root Sports wasn't there and wasn't available to you. Instead, it was available on cable, and the Blazers touted it as available into more homes. And that was kind of the big sell when they initially signed the deal, moving away from Comcast Regional Network, Comcast Sports Northwest. But so it just wasn't available to many folks, right? It wasn't in your homes that easily. Now it could be, you could pay for it and you could get it there. I think it's maybe a little overstated how many people have truly cut the cord in the modern era. I think people roughly my age think nobody in the world has cable, but talk to anyone 8 years older than you. Your friends have cable. But beyond just the lack of distribution and having one choice, right? You had to sign with a deal with Comcast, right? A lack of distribution and essentially a monopoly. The product wasn't particularly good. Root Sports didn't put any money into broadcasting Blazer games. They didn't provide any secondary content. Now, they here and there, they had little secondary shows, but it was mostly repurposed content. It was not standalone furniture type of programming that you could count on. They didn't have a post-game show. Once the Blazers post-game show ended, that was kind of that, and Root would replay the game a little bit. It was also broadcast in relatively low quality. It was just a mess. And then at the start of last season, because Root Sports didn't have it was a very niche audience and doesn't have a very wide distribution range or an interest. It's like Oregon, Washington, Montana, and Alaska ain't exactly the pull that you might need to be able to leverage cable companies. More on that a little bit. Comcast jacked up the price. They moved Root Sports into a premium tier, and then you had to pay a little bit more money each month to access your favorite basketball team. That's okay when the Blazers are kind of good, but when the Blazers are having one of their worst seasons in the team history after trading away a franchise icon, the team is more expensive to watch. The games are not particularly competitive, and the product is not delivered to you in a really aesthetically pleasing way, often broadcast in like 540p. Shout out to my digital heads out there. Root Sports was just a mess. So they dumped him. And they rightly dumped him. And they dumped him, more importantly, after the Kraken dumped him. So Root Sports carried Kraken games, which is the NHL team in Seattle. They carried Mariners games because I believe it's 51% owned by the Mariners. I don't know how the percentage is exactly, but it's the Mariners own a small majority of the company. And they carried Blazer games. And if you're familiar with Root Sports, you know that sometimes Kraken games would preempt Blazer games, so the Blazers would actually be on Root Sports 2, and you'd have to go searching for them on your dial, and sometimes it would screw up your DVR and those type of things. As a Portlander, the basketball team getting preempted for a hockey team that you don't know about doesn't feel great. But the Kraken said, Root Sports is terrible. It doesn't get us what we want. We're out of here. And the Kraken said, we are going to an over-the-air product. It'll be free over the air. Here's how it'll be distributed locally in Portland or locally in Seattle. And if you're outside of the broadcast area for the over-the-air product, for a cable, local cable product, they're going to have what they call over-the-top, OTT streaming option. So you can watch Kraken games streaming. As soon as the Kraken did that, and I reported as much here, I speculated as much, I should say, here on this podcast, is the Blazers have to follow suit. It can't be easier to watch Kraken games in the city of Portland than to watch the Portland Trail Blazers. The question is when they would follow suit, whether they would do it this year, whether they would wait for the contract to run out at the end of next season, and how quickly they would pursue the route that the Kraken have gone. I think it is inevitable that that's where this ends up. When the Blazers say an exciting announcement on the future television home of Blazers basketball will be made soon, you better believe that's going to be on local cable. That's going to be on over the air, pick it up with antenna type of broadcast. Last year, I believe one, it might have been two, but I'm certain it was one. And in my notes, I couldn't find a second one, or in my quick research, there was broadcast on KPTV, which is the local Fox affiliate here, but it could be any of the local affiliates. It could be, even the local CW channel, which is tied to the local CBS partner here. It could be on KGW, Channel 8, like it was back in the day. But one of the local stations will get it. I am 100% confident in that is the solution. The question is, when do the Blazers offer a direct-to-consumer streaming product for those customers that are outside of the television range? It's not if, it's when. When do they do that? Do they do that this season? I would bet that they do. But how quickly can they, I imagine they've been working on that for most of the summer, and they'll have a product, and we'll see what happens. But the Suns, the Phoenix Suns, they went to an over-the-air broadcast and then an over-the-top streaming option. The Jazz went to an over-the-air broadcast and then an over-the-top streaming option. The Clippers offer Clipper Vision as well, which is a $20 a month service that you can subscribe and stream, specifically stream games. The Blazers are going to do this. In fact, I know for a fact that 7-8 years ago, the Blazers were one of the first teams that was exploring a potential direct-to-consumer digital product, but they were a little bit worried about the quality of it. They didn't want to bring you games that were exclusively broadcast on Facebook or whatever and have it be just a crappy experience. But they were exploring it. They were in the early stages of exploring it, one of the sort of the earliest teams to go that route. And then they obviously didn't, and here we are in 2024, and they're finally getting there, and we don't know when that will be. But I am certain that the solution to this will model exactly what the Kraken did, and model what the Suns did, and model what the Jazz did, and model what the Clippers did. It's going to be an over-the-air product. It's going to be on. You'll be able to get it with bunny ears, or if you're already a subscriber to the to one of the big streamers, then if you get local channels on those big streamers, it'll be available for you right there. But they're going to have to offer digital products, because the whole thing that they touted was it's now available in Seattle and all these places, and the Blazers broadcast network won't change. So they're going to offer this over-the-air product, but if the over-the-air channel, say it's on KGW, right? It's on Channel 8. if you live in Seattle, you're not going to have access to that local over-the-air channel from the Portland Trail Blazers, but you would still be blacked out from games. And the Blazers, for as weird as they are about stuff, are not going to suffer that. They're not going to suffer that issue. They're going to solve it. My question would be when they solve it. I would bet they solve it for this season. I would bet the exciting announcement for the future television home of the Blazers involves a over-the-air product and an over-the-top streaming network that you can subscribe to. And I think some folks will prefer that because you live a digital lifestyle. You watch games on your computer. You watch games on your iPad. Your kids are watching Bluey, so you don't have access to the TV. And if you want to watch the games, I guess if your kids stay past to like tip-off times, probably post Bluey. But listen, I got a young child. I don't know what 8-year-olds are watching. Email me lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. But that's the solution. But it gets a little murkier because while that is going to be an obvious free solution for those of you in market, the future of NBA streaming is a little bit dicey, a little bit tricky, and it's going to make things, 10% more complicated. Let's talk about that 10% in the second segment. Join me there, won't ya? But first, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. There's 3 words you need to know: passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive, and eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, whether that's superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed or power or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, let's keep it rolling talking about the future of TV. I think, the Suns pioneered it, the Jazz followed suit, the Clippers followed suit. I think the Blazers are headed that way with an over-the-air streaming, an over-the-air broadcast, and then an over-the-top streaming option beyond that. What will it be called? Bring back Blazer Vision. Blazer Vision actually outdates me in Portland. I didn't move here until the 21st century, so I only know the tales. But beyond, so like in market, it's going to be easier to watch the Blazers. It's going to be easier. They're only on national TV one time. So like, even if you don't have, like, if you just have bunny ears, you can watch 81 of the Blazer games. I guess 3 of them are on NBA TV. So you'd be able to watch 78 of the 82 Blazer games, and you could like go to your friend's house or your local television-based establishment to watch the other ones rather. But like, it's going to be easier in market. And out of market, it was already a little bit easier to watch games. Like if you live out of the Portland market and out of like the broadcast area, like it's easier to watch Blazer games as a League Pass subscriber, and sometimes cheaper to watch Blazer games as a League Pass subscriber. One of my good friends, former guest in the show, if you're a longtime listener, my friend Chuck, like he lives in freaking Manhattan, and it's easier for him to watch Blazer games than me. Like he has a simpler solution to watch Blazer games. That's kind of a mess, right? Like that's not ideal for anybody. So I think immediately the Root Sports stuff solves that, right? Because if you're in town, in market, it's going to be easy. I assume there'll be a streaming option. It gets a little trickier, though, as the media landscape across the NBA changes, and that's coming. With the new media rights deal that doesn't kick in this season but kicks in next year, stuff's going to be a little more distributed, a little more broadly, it's going to be a little more spread out, is the words I'm trying to find. Because it's going to be on NBC, it's going to be ESPN and ABC. If you have a cable provider, you're going to have ESPN and ABC, but I'm willing to wager that Basketball Nights in America or Sunday Night Hoops or whatever they end up calling it, Sunday Night Basketball on NBC's like standalone feature product hosted by Mike Tirico and like going to be like the marquee games, which the NBA needs. They need to have like marquee fun games that we look forward to each week. That's like, I think that's a really important part of the future of the league is like that we, that on Tuesday we can look forward to a game on Saturday that's like fun and that we'll all watch. That's going to help keep interest in the league. You sicko listening to this podcast in August about the Portland Trailblazers, I'm not worried about your interest, maybe the broader interest of the league, broader popularity of the league. But I bet that NBC product's going to be parked on Peacock. Like, I watched the Olympics. A lot of it was parked on Peacock. It was a pretty good experience. I thought Peacock was pretty nice. But it cost me $8 for the month to watch the Olympics, and the NBA season is 6 months long. So that's another, $8-9 or whatever to watch Peacock. So then you get into this weird world where it's actually, while it has become simpler in some situations to watch the Blazers, it could eventually become harder. They're not a national TV type team just yet. In fact, they are tied with the Wizards for the fewest national TV games of any team in the league this year at 1. But next season, they might end up with a certain big Mainer who's going to attend college in Durham, North Carolina. And like that would probably make them more appointment television. But even then, even if they capture it, like, what are they going to get? 7, 8 national TV games? Maybe 10. Let's just call it a round number. 10. That's 72 games that are other places. But eventually, when you do have a team that is like somewhat higher profile, right? Like in the sort of that mid range. Hey, 12 or 15 games of the team I love are on television. Some upwards of 20 if they're a competitive playoff team are on national television. Well, then you've got to pay for your cable streamer, ESPN and ABC, to get those, or ESPN, I guess, ABC's over the air. You're going to watch the local games with some sort of product, and you're going to subscribe to Peacock. If you're out of market, you're subscribing to cable to watch your ESPN games. And like, if you're just a fan of the Blazers, you're probably a fan of the rest of the NBA. I actually have friends who basically only watch the Blazers and know the NBA. I know you people exist. Shout out to y'all. I love it. But like, you got to subscribe to NBC or NBC's Peacock app. You got to subscribe to something to get ESPN streamed to you, maybe even like their streaming service, like a Disney-based thing. Maybe you're also subscribing to the Blazers over the top, a digital streamer. Like, it just got right back to being expensive to watch the team and watch the NBA again. I don't think this is solved. I do think in the immediate future for Blazer fans who live in the Portland area, like the greater sort of, I think it goes like south of Eugene, but not much further south when you're in Oregon, and it goes up to Seattle north. I'm not sure how far east it goes, but like Montana, through Idaho. So like, it'll potentially be easier for us in the greater Northwest region, because it'll be like very straightforward to say, okay, I'm going to get bunny ears if I'm in the broadcast area, and otherwise I'm going to pay, whatever, $15, $20 a month. And if you love the Blazers, I think like $150 a year to watch 78 games is like, that's not crazy. It's not nothing. And I don't mean to dismiss $150 as nothing. Everything is expensive and everything is a subscription now. I totally get it. But like, that's, like, I could see that as like a somewhat reasonable price considering how much like cable TV costs you. Although like life is expensive, so make your choices, and maybe watching a terrible Blazers game is like not how you want to do it, and you want to just subscribe to the free podcast coming at you 5 days a week during the season to get your recaps. But I think the digital media world and the regional sports world has changed enough that like this over-the-air product and then an over-the-top streaming option is the way, right? That's the path that other teams are going to follow. Again, Phoenix, Utah, the Clippers, now the Blazers. New Orleans dropped their, broke up with their regional sports network, and they're going to go over the air as well. The Pelicans are going to be over the air. The Pelicans have not announced an over-the-top streamer. Maybe they'll get there, maybe they won't. But like, this is the direction that I think most teams are going. And this was obvious because regional sports networks were dying. And this was a thing that was obvious for years, is that this was not a model that was going to be sustainable for any longer. And eventually some of these larger streamers, Peacock, ESPN streamer, however you stream ABC, like those were going to win. The Disneys and the, I don't know the parent company of NBC off the top of my head, but like, those big streamers were going to win out in these battles, and we'll see how it plays out into the future. But like, this was something you could see coming, which is why I think the Blazers switch to Root Sports is something that they should be embarrassed by. This was obvious. Let's talk about how we got here and how they got here in the third segment. Join me there, won't you? But first, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. It's America's number one sports book, and it's also baseball season. So get ready because it's winding down. We're headed towards the stretch run. The playoffs start in about 6 weeks. And if it's baseball season and the playoffs are coming, that also means football's back. And at FanDuel, they got something different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So why not check it out? With YouTube TV base plan, you're able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. It's super simple. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's number one sports book and get that free trial because football is a-coming. All right, still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to the Locked On Blazers. We'll talk about the Blazers TV deal. This unequivocally good news. The direction that this was an inevitable direction, but it wasn't an unavoidable way to get here. Regional sports networks have been dying. If you've listened to this program, when I've covered TV, I've covered this extensively, and I want to be totally clear and upfront here. For a couple years, 2 or 3 or 4, sometime, I worked briefly for a regional sports network. I had a part-time role, did some work for NBC Sports Northwest. So like I saw it up close. I was not an insider, but I was closer than you. I was in there, right? When I worked for the television network, when I worked for NBC Sports Northwest, the Blazer games were broadcast on the channel. And when the Blazers moved away from NBC, I stopped working there because that company didn't exist anymore, right? And when they moved away from Root, it was in some ways celebrated because people didn't like Comcast. And I think specifically the Blazers didn't like Comcast. It was just not a partnership that worked for a variety of reasons. Comcast had its problems. Sure, like you all watched it on TV. It had its issues, but it solved some of the big things. By the time the Blazers ended their relationship with Comcast, you could get NBC Sports Northwest or like Comcast Sports Northwest. You could get it on YouTube TV, and it was available on Hulu. It was on the big streamers, and it was available there, and it was available on Comcast. Like it had cord cutters covered. It had your classic cable providers covered. They had standalone, a fair amount actually of standalone programming. Like they spent money on covering the Blazers. They didn't spend a lot of money on covering other stuff, but they spent money on covering the Blazers. Like they had a relatively big team providing content in a variety of ways on the Trailblazers. Like I was the third person who was assigned to cover them on game nights and like provide content, both video and television and written. So like there was a commitment to it, right? But it was not a relationship the Blazers were interested in keeping. When they chose to move to Root Sports, they said, we're done with these folks. We don't want to deal with them. We want to move to Root because Root is going to get us in more households, and that's what they sold it as. And it's true. It was broadcast to more households. And I think in some ways that was celebrated. But it became clear that Root Sports was a mess, and this should have been obvious that Root Sports was a mess immediately. While NBC Sports Northwest, nay Comcast, NBC Sports Northwest was imperfect and all of these things, like, whatever, annoying in the ways that you remember it being. It was part of a much larger tree. Like it was supported by Big Peacock. It was supported by the NBC family, the Comcast family, right? Like it was supported by a much larger company that had other regional networks that were covering the teams like Boston and the Warriors and I believe also the Kings. Like they had a way to negotiate, and the Chicago with the Bulls, like they had a way to negotiate. They had leverage with other larger markets, so they could get places like YouTube and they could get places like Hulu. Root never had that, was never going to have that, and was obvious they were never going to have that. What does Root have? The Kraken and the Mariners? What is the sell to YouTube TV? What is the sell to Hulu? They were never going to be on those options. There was no way, because regional sports are dying, right? Because there is less value in YouTube even showing like like freaking Kings games or whatever, right? Like even distributing NBC Sports California or whatever it's called in Sacramento, like because there's less money in that, there's going to be, even without the backing of the sort of larger regional network that spans the country and the small other markets, like there's no way that route was ever going to get on there. So as soon as the Blazers switched to the cable route, that was the only way it was going to go. It was the only way it was going to go. They were never going to win a battle. They were never even going to enter into negotiations to get on to get on the big streamers like YouTube TV and Hulu. Like, ask Denver fans how hard it's been when there is a regional sports network with limited leverage like they're on altitude. It's a mess. It's still very hard to watch one of the best players, like literally the best Denver Nugget ever, one of the best players in the history of the league, and Nikola Jokic locally in Denver, because this is a team. These are teams when regional sports networks, period, they're already dying because the model is just not going to work. But when they have no leverage and they're super niche, they can't negotiate with the big boys to make it up there. The heavy hitters are not interested in negotiating. They do not need to negotiate in good faith because there is no upside for them to distribute your product. And the Blazers chose Root Sports with the full knowledge of that climate, knowing it was never going to get on the streamers. They knew what they were doing. They chose this, and it made it harder for you to watch it because of an intentional decision the franchise made. Don't get it twisted. Do not get it twisted. They chose this path, and now they're getting it right. And I think it's okay to say they got it extremely wrong for 4 years. Something they stepped on the rake, and then they turned around, stepped on the rake, and then they stepped on the rake again. And Sideshow Bob was mad about his nemesis, but his nemesis was the pile of rakes that was all across the yard. You should have seen it coming. They knew it was right there. But they chose this path. Now they're gonna rectify it. Why I say this was inevitable, but in some ways avoidable, is because the regional networks were going to die anyways. Maybe if the Blazers stay on NBC Sports Northwest, it is, again, too niche, too small, and it has so little programming that interests YouTube TV and Hulu that they jack up the rates. They can't, the distribution is no longer there, and how are you ever going to get back? Perhaps the leverage of having things like the Warriors and the Celtics and the Bulls to play against, like, it just doesn't work out, and the Blazers end up parked on Peacock, and they end up in this situation anyways, where they have to pull out of a contract with a cable provider, and they have to go to the over the air, and they have to go to the over the top streaming. Maybe this was always going to happen, and the timeline for it to happen just was sped up a little bit, or maybe even slowed down a little bit because they changed partnerships, right? Like perhaps I think this was regional sports networks are going to die. They're going to be go the way of the dodo. They're just not in most markets. They're not viable as a way to distribute your sports teams on your television. It's really been a huge problem in Major League Baseball, and it's coming to the NBA now. But the Blazers chose this path. They couldn't fight the inevitable sort of outcome, but they chose to step on the rake. They chose something that was an avoidable path by choosing Root. They, I believe, as John Gonzano wrote in his story, disenfranchised you, the viewer. Don't let them off the hook for this nonsense. You could tell them that they did a stupid thing, and then you could say this, like, hey, this is the solution I wanted. I'm going to watch the team because I love the team. It's going to be easier to watch the team, and I really like that. When they offer digital products, and I live out of market, or I live in Coeur d'Alene or Boise or whatever, and somehow I'm still in Blazers country, I'm going to subscribe to that because I can watch it. The solution is going to get there. It's going to be better. It's going to be easier to watch. But how they got here, I think, is important, because how they got here was they made a decision that was worse for you, the viewer, worse for you, the fan of the freaking team. And then it all came to a head because they also just no one wanted to watch them on TV. The ratings were crashing because it was harder to watch them, more expensive to watch them, and the product was worse. If the product's going to be no good, you might as well give it away mostly for free, or at least for a lot cheaper. And the solution is here. It's going to be easier to watch the Portland Trail Blazers. Thank goodness. That is going to do it for today's show. I appreciate you listening. 3 days a week, all August long, and into the first couple weeks of September. And then we'll be back to 5 days a week. Tell your friends about the program, and then come back for Friday's show. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.